Hello and welcome back to the Bright Light Wellness YouTube channel and Substack. Today I want to have a chat with you about something that's happening astrologically right now. I'm really been into astrology and whatever I'm into, I tend to share about and because it's on my heart and it's what I'm listening to and what I'm learning about and I like to share. I'm very much the type of person who learns new things and then likes to share with her communities. So today we're going to talk about Chiron. And Chiron is an asteroid known as the Wounded Healer. I'll talk to you a minute about what Chiron is in a minute and the themes behind Chiron. But Chiron is transiting, so meaning it's moving. So when planets transit around the zodiac wheel, they move from zodiac signs. It's going through a transit, and it's moving from Aries to Taurus right now. So it moved on June 19th, which is yesterday. I'm recording this on June 20th. And it's gonna, because of Chiron has it's an asteroid that has a more of an elliptical orbit, and it will kind of it will transition into Taurus, but then it will transition back into Aries for a little bit, and then it will be in Taurus for about 8 years. And when there are transits moving through a zodiac, this kind of affects the collective energy. So it's like it's more about how the energy is affecting us as a collective, and how that energy is shifting from Aries to Taurus. Now, Chiron will also affect you more individually based on your personal chart and how that's affecting you, where your personal Chiron placement is in your chart. So that's a deeper meaning conversation that we can have if we do a natal chart reading. If you book in for a homeopathic session, I do look at where Chiron is in your chart. If you allow me to look at your astrological chart and have that information. So yeah. Let's just talk a little bit about Chiron. We're gonna deepen into our understanding of Chiron today. So first of all, Chiron is moving into Taurus, and when Chiron moves into Taurus, Chiron is the wounded healer, so it's going to carry some wounds around the sign that it's moving into. So it's moving from Aries, which is the wound of identity, and now we're moving, which is like Aries is first of the zodiac sign. It's quick fire, it's cardinal fire, fast fire, and it's all about self and identity. And now Chiron is moving into Taurus, and now it's moving into grounded, fixed earth. And Taurus has a lot of collective or a lot of energy around wounds of safety and worth. And we can use nature to support us through this time as well because it's grounded earth, it's fixed earth. So we're going to talk about that, and how this energy is going to affect the collective. And then we're going to talk about like a little bit about what Chiron is. So, I really, really love this quote by Rumi, and it's the wound is the place where light enters you. So, and I feel that so much because our wounds, right, are the how we bring in the light, how we transform, how we transcend, how we move towards the light through wounds, through hurts, through dark times. After the darkness always comes the light. That's why my company is called Bright Light Wellness because I was in such a dark place that my wound of that darkness and that wound of that all the pain points that came out through my own healing journey, it helped move me towards light. And I wanted to be that bright light to help others move towards light. That's my whole goal of my practice. So I really wanted to share that quote with you today. And you might have feeling this energy like as planetary start shifting. Sometimes you feel that energy like right before it comes out. Um, and then as we move in it, and then it's going to go back to Aries, and then it's going to be there for 8 years, this energy. So it might feel like life has been stripping away old definitions of security, around health, around money. Taurus is big around money, or even a sense of why you truly matter, right? Your worth. You're not alone if you're feeling this because June 19th, 2026, Chiron, who is the wounded healer, that's the archetype of him, he moved from Aries to Taurus and beginning a new collective healing cycle because Chiron is the wounded healer. So it's a collective healing cycle. And that will be from, it will be, that energy will be with us until 2034. So it's a while that this energy is going to be here. So it's astrological transits affect us quite greatly. In fact, in homeopathy, you might call it an aggravation when a transit is moving through like your sun or your moon or your rising sign. I had Chiron moving through my descendant. That was really because my descendant's in Aries and it was moving through that and I felt that a lot. Um, so you can feel it and sometimes it's just a case of working with that energy and helping your body move through that energy and waiting a little bit because that energy sometimes is it takes some time. Like it's sometimes it's just it's not really your fault sometimes that you're going through something really hard. Sometimes it's just where the energy is planetarily that's kind of having and that was very validating for me. That's having things kind of feel a little bit messy. Okay. So this is when these Chiron moves from zodiac to zodiac, it's like a shift in humanity that's being asked to be healed. All right. But I think before we even talk about Chiron and Taurus, let's understand the story of Chiron itself because that might help you understand what I'm even talking about. Because you might be like, I've never even heard of Chiron, Vanessa. Like, what are you talking about? So, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. The planetary names and they all come from Greek mythology. Okay. So, Chiron in Greek mythology, he was born under some unusual circumstances. His father, Cronus, which was Saturn actually, disguised. So Saturn is Chiron's father, and he disguised himself as a horse while pursuing the sea nymph Philantra. And he like Philantra kept trying to flee him. She turned herself into a bird, and then a fish, and then a horse, and Saturn or Cronus just kept going after her. And basically, there was a union that Philantra didn't want. So Chiron was born from basically a rape. He's born from, he was unwanted by Philantra, and it was Saturn was just going after her basically, and he was extremely persistent. And when he finally caught her, he mounted her. That's the story. And Chiron was a centaur, so those are those half human, half horse. Okay. And his mother was horrified by him, not only because for many reasons, horrified by him from his appearance and because of, she did not want Saturn or Cronus she did not want that. She did not want to have that interaction. So he's born out of a very negative circumstance. And his mother rejected him and abandoned him. So from the very beginning, Chiron was felt abandoned, rejected, and very different. And he was unwanted. And unlike the other centaurs who were often wild and impulsive and, you know, um, did things that were unkind to women as well, Chiron was more wise, gentle, and a highly respected teacher. He was actually raised by Apollo, the god of light, of medicine, and philanthropy, and Chiron mastered many healing arts. So he was a very good healer. He was healing in herbal medicine, astrology, music, philosophy, spiritual wisdom, and he was a mentor to many legendary heroes in Greek mythology, like Achilles and like Hercules. Um, and he he really devoted his life to healing others. And I was find it interesting. I was learning a little bit more about Chiron, and Chiron is also named after the flower Centauri, which is a Bach flower remedy that is really good for healing people-pleasing patterns and yeah, an ability to say no to people. So the Bach flower Centauri has this inability to say no, always says yes, has a trouble putting up boundaries and is very people pleasing. And there's usually a deep rooted in trauma that causes this, and that fits Chiron very well. But that's Chiron is named after that flower century, also Centauri. So interesting. So he devoted his life to helping others heal. Yet, despite possessing extraordinary knowledge, he carried a wound that he could not heal within himself. His own wound of being abandoned and unwanted. He couldn't heal that. His own mother's rejection. And according to the myth, Chiron was accidentally struck by one of Hercules' poisoned arrows. There was actually a bunch of centaurs. There was a wedding, and there was a bunch of centaurs, and Chiron was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And these other centaurs were harassing the women there. And Hercules was very annoyed by this, and he shot his arrows with some sort of poisonous plant to the centaurs. And Chiron was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Chiron and Hercules were great friends, but Chiron was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he got the poison arrow. And the wound was excruciating and incurable. He couldn't cure this wound because Chiron was immortal, and he could not die. So he could not cure this wound, and he could not heal the pain. So he was left with living in pain. So this is the wound of Chiron. You see, it's something that we carry, something that can be ancestrally passed down, something that comes through trauma in our life. Sometimes it's a wound that's in not just ours, okay? And it's a wound that really cannot fully be healed, but we can continue to work on it. It's a wound that will show up in our life, not this one in Taurus, but the one in our personal chart. I'll share mine in my personal chart in a minute. But the one in our personal chart, in our natal chart, it's a wound that we carry and it'll show up again and again in our lives. Um, so Chiron, he was forced to live with the suffering that no amount of wisdom, medicine, or skill could completely remove. And eventually he stopped trying to conquer the world and he learned to just live with his pain. He had to learn to live with his pain and suffering. And he's suffering dependent on his compassion, and his pain expanded his understanding. So through the pain was the healing of many other things, through the learning, right? Through the growth. Pain, I know pain, and pain can really bring a lot of healing and growth. Pain can bring gratitude. Pain can bring alignment. Pain can bring, more light. Pain can bring more spirituality, right? And that very wound that could not be fixed became the source of his greatest wisdom. In the end, Chiron willingly surrendered his immortality so that Prometheus could be freed. He was actually something about a liver. I'm trying to remember that story. He was actually turned into stone by another god, maybe Zeus, and he was a stone. So anyway, Chiron trades places with him, and so his transformation of suffering into an act of service and redemption. So he took his suffering and he freed his friend, and his friend was now freed, but he took his place. Okay. So this is why Chiron is the wounded healer. Not because he healed his wound, but because he learned to transform his pain into wisdom. Okay? So that's the story of the wounded healer. I wanted you to know that. And Chiron kind of represents in astrology, it symbolizes for us our deepest wounds, places where we feel different and inadequate, places where we experience rejection and abandonment, long living patterns that invite growth and wisdom born from suffering and medicine that we eventually offer others. Okay. Often our Chiron placement points to the very area where we struggle most and later become uniquely equipped to help others. So the wounds become the gift. Okay. Now, again, we're going to talk about Chiron right now entering Taurus as a transit. So that means it is collective energy, not individual to you. That's where your Chiron lands for you natally in your natal chart, in your birth chart. And I will share mine so you can kind of get an idea a little bit about that. So, like I said, Chiron enters Taurus June 19th, 2026, and he remains there till 2034. He has a little bit of time and space in the beginning where he goes back to Aries, but he'll be here for a while. And again, Chiron is an asteroid, not a planet, by the way. And in previously, Chiron was in Aries from 2018 to 2026, which was the wound of identity, independence, and the right to exist. So as a collective, we were feeling that. So many people spent the last 8 years thinking about who am I? What do I truly want? Am I allowed to take up space? And how do I stand up for myself? I felt that immensely, immensely, because I went through my healing journey. It started in 2019, really got amplified in 2020. And a lot of that pain and suffering that I had, there was a lot of, well, who am I in this world? Do I still want to be a special ed teacher? Or does this experience change me and do I become a healer? What do I truly want out of my life? I felt a lot of that. How do I take up space in this world? How am I serving the world? And how do I stand up for myself? Wow, that's been huge. This has been a big, big shift for me. And I'm sure if you look back over your last 8 years, you can probably feel some of that energy as well. So instead of asking, who am I? Humanity began asking, what truly sustains me? right? Now that question is beginning to change because now we're moving from the energy of who am I to what truly sustains my life. Okay, fixed, grounded energy. Rather from fast cardinal energy, fast fire, we're moving to fixed, grounded. That's different energy. So collective themes of Chiron and Taurus. Taurus, excuse me, governs the body, food, nourishment, money, resources, stability, structure, pleasure, beauty, nature, earth, self-worth, values. These are the themes. And as Chiron moves through Taurus, many of these areas become places of challenge and also healing. Okay, so we may, as a collective, witness questions around security, economic uncertainty, often forces us to examine where we place our trust. Have we built our lives externally to an external system alone? Or have we cultivated internal stability, right? Healing our relationship with the body. So you might think about that, about your security, right? Many people have spent years, well, this is going to be also the relationship with the body is going to come up as well. So many people have spent years viewing the body as something to control, suppress, fix. Chiron and Taurus offers a different approach. The body becomes less of a machine and more of a messenger. Instead of asking, how do I force my to behave? We start asking, what is my body trying to communicate and how do I best support it? And grounded Taurus Earth makes me think cell salts, right? We're going to think of cell salts. We're going to think of connecting with nature, putting our feet in the grass, being in the sunlight, gardening, getting abundance through nature, through what we plant and put our seeds into the ground. It's all of that kind of energy. Taurus, again, is fixed Earth. It's Earth. It's a very nature-based sign. My brother's a Taurus, and he is like, he was doing all the quantum biology stuff before me. I mean, he was like, naked in the sun grounding before I was. And it's like, wow, that's so Taurus, right? Because that's the healing power of Taurus is connection with fixed earth, our nature. Um, there might be some things coming up about self-worth. Many inherited beliefs are maybe likely to surface, like I have to earn rest, like I have to keep going, I have to earn rest, I must work harder to deserve love. There isn't enough. Taurus has this big wound of I'm not enough. Okay. Very strong in Taurus. And my value depends on productivity. I have to be productive to be valuable. So Chiron and Taurus will expose these stories. So hopefully they can finally be healed within us and return to the earth. Like I said, Taurus is earth energy. Okay. It's fixed earth. It's very grounded energy. So it's deeply connected with nature. So in this transit may bring renewal, collective interest in regenerative agriculture. We've already seen this happening. Local food systems, circadian biology work, right? Connecting with nature and circadian rhythms, natural healing approaches, seasonal living, slower rhythms, more simplicity. A Taurus is a slow sign. Aries is a whoosh, fire. It's a firecracker. Taurus is slow, grounded, stable, right? So you might feel that shift in that energy. Many people may begin discovering that solutions they seek are not always found in more technology or more productivity or more complexity, but healing comes to remembering our connection with nature, right? So I love that part about this Chiron and Taurus for the next 8 years. And Chiron's going to go in Gemini next, which is where my wound is. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of times for play and fun. Gemini can be a lot communication, but also play and fun needs to be in everything that Gemini does. So that'll be fun when we move into that one. That will be my Chiron return. If you have Chiron and Taurus, you're going to be going through your Chiron return as well. Okay, so great lessons for Chiron and Taurus. Perhaps the greatest question in this transit is, can you feel safe without controlling everything? My Scorpio sun has been working on that quite a bit. Can you trust your body? Can you trust this season? Can you trust that your worth is not dependent on your productivity? Can you receive nourishment without guilt? Taurus teaches us that abundance is not always about having more, but about the ability to recognize that we already have enough, right? And we have abundance in many ways, okay? So remember that. Maybe sit and think about all the things that you do have and all the ways that you are abundant. Take some time and do that, okay? Now, supporting yourself during this transit. Reconnect with nature, like I just mentioned, because Taurus is fixed earth, it's grounded. So spend time outside, watch the sunrise, garden, walk barefoot. Allow your nervous system to remember what it was designed for. So, yes. Your nervous system, allow your nervous system to remember the rhythm it was designed for, to be connected with these circadian rhythms. This Chiron transit in Taurus is a huge time for honoring circadian rhythms, okay? Because Taurus, the Taurus energy itself is very much about nature, okay? All right, nourish yourself rather than punish. So focus on real foods, adequate nourishment, mineral balance, rest without guilt, light exposure, consistency instead of perfection, and simplify. Ask yourself what truly matters. What am I chasing? What am I afraid to lose? And what truly sustains me? Okay. Allow pleasure. Beauty is medicine. Beauty is so medicine for me. Just being in nature is so medicine for me, but the beauty of nature is so medicine. A home cooked meal, right? Music, sunlight, a slow morning. Pleasure doesn't have to be frivolous, right? For Taurus, pleasure is a part of healing. Okay. So allow that energy, allow yourself to have pleasure in your healing journey. Okay. So now that's how Chiron is affecting the collective. And we all feel transits, especially transits that are outer planets. So we feel Pluto transits as a collective, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn. We feel these as a collective energy when they happen. Uranus and Neptune for sure, Pluto for sure. We feel these greatly. Uranus just moved into Gemini and it's going to be there for quite a big time too. So there's a big, and that will make Gemini stuff even a bit more erratic, which is kind of fun. All right, well, let's focus on this. There's so much to always share. Okay, so that's how it's affecting the collective. So me personally, you have everybody has a natal chart. It's a time when you were born, an energy map, okay, of what you a lot of things about your life, and it will tell you what you will likely struggle with. Um, and my Chiron, my planet Chiron, where it was when I was born, where is Chiron when I was born, was in Gemini. Okay, my Chiron is in Gemini, just like my sun is in Scorpio and my moon is in Aquarius, right? My Chiron was in Gemini. And it's Gemini in the eighth house. Okay, so this is personal to me. It doesn't have anything to do with you unless you also have a Chiron and Gemini in the eighth house. So collective transits affect everyone. Each of us carries our own Chiron wound and imprint. Okay, so my natal chart with Gemini in the eighth house is and understanding this placement has helped me make sense of many parts of my own journey. So Chiron and Gemini is going to carry the wound around or the around communication, around learning, sharing ideas, being heard, and speaking's one truth. So people who have a Chiron in Gemini often carry the wounds around feeling misunderstood, being afraid to speak up, questioning whether their voice matters, feeling like they have to know everything before they can teach it, and fearing criticism or rejection of their ideas. So I have so much to say about this, but I'm going to try to keep it brief because it's not about me, right? But I think learning and hearing my story is helpful for you as a listener. So communication. Um, it's a big deal for me to be on YouTube, on podcasts, and sharing my story, right? It's so healing for me, but it's not easy. And it wasn't something I felt like I could, it wasn't something it wasn't something I easily stepped into a role. I had to push myself. And through my own suffering, I felt like I had to share, and my voice had to be heard through my own wounds and suffering. I had to share this with the world because if I wasn't, I was doing the world a disservice. I had to come make this video. Like, I feel these strong calls. I'm like, oh, I have to share about this. It's so important. People need to know about this transit, and people need to know how much their Chiron in the chart can affect them and how they can support it. Learning. I was actually diagnosed with a learning disability in fourth grade, and that's a hard thing for me to say and share, but I've done so much healing around it now that I can come forth because I would want to hide that very psychotic, keep it secret. But I'm open and willing to share about it because that's not who I am. But that was a hard time for me, and I felt like I wasn't heard. I felt like I was misunderstood. I felt like I was afraid to speak up. I felt like my voice didn't matter. I felt like, all these things. I was criticized. I felt like I couldn't communicate. All of these things because I had a very unfortunate experience in fourth grade with a teacher and I didn't do well and I shut down and I refused to do any work and I never wanted to, I was very hurt. And I was in a really bad place. And then I was diagnosed with a learning disability. And then I had a fifth grade teacher who was like amazing and wonderful and really took me under her wing and nourished me and gave me the support that I just needed to flourish. And then after that, I learned through that wound, I learned I'm very smart. I just have to work hard. And I feel like I've been trying to prove myself, for a very long time, especially in my middle school, high school, college career. And then as a teacher, I wound up becoming a teacher for 15 years in special ed, proving myself that I wasn't dumb, like I was really smart. And I've been proving myself of that for a very long time. But out of that wound of learning, that wound in learning, right? It's very Gemini in Gemini, Chiron, right? It's the wound of learning. I was the wounded healer. I said, I'm going to be a teacher and I'm never going to allow a child in my classroom to feel like I felt. And that's what I did. That's why I became the teacher. That's why I was a special ed teacher for 15 years. And then when I got sick and had to leave that profession due to my own choice because I felt like I couldn't do my job the way I should, I had another wound there around being heard because nobody could hear me. I was saying, this is what happened to me. This is how I'm feeling. And I'd go to all these practitioners. I felt like no one was hurting. No one was hearing me. No one was listening. And I felt so angry about that because I was like, I need help and no one was helping me. And then I decided to become a healer because I said I'm never going to allow people to feel unheard and unseen in my practice. I'm going to hear them. I'm going to see them. I'm not going to be a doctor who spends 7 minutes with a client. No, I'm going to spend 2 hours with my clients on my first sessions and an hour follow up and really hear them and listen to them and listen to their ideas, right? So those wounds became the medicine for not only me, but the medicine for others. And this me teaching and sitting here, this is medicine for me. I don't do podcasts and YouTubes just for you. I love you and I'm glad you're here with me, but I also do it for me because sharing my voice, speaking my truth, sharing my ideas, speaking up, knowing that my voice matters in the world, this is all medicine for me. That's why I do it. That's why I love it. That's why I feel so aligned. And it's just it's so relevant. Like, I've gone through just another Chiron situation right now, like around being about honestly and speaking truth that I'm not really sharing completely yet, but there's more. Like, there's just so much. And I've had a Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is very much connected to the thyroid. Speaking is one's truth. We have to speak the truth. If we don't speak the truth, we will develop disease because this is our area of communication, our thyroid. So it's just all so connected and so beautiful. And it's just knowing this, it's like knowing astrology has been so validating for me because it's like, oh my God, this all makes sense. And this is why. And this is why. Oh, I understand this now. That's how it felt every time I learned something new about my chart. I understand how this has shown up for me in my life. Now, not only is Chiron in Gemini, it's also in my eighth house, which the eighth house is a very transformative house. My chart is I was told once from a friend of mine, she's like, this is when I knew nothing about astrology, but very limited amount. She's like, your life is one big giant transformation. And I was like, what? I don't understand. And just having Chiron in the eighth house, that's very transformative. So I'm gonna really I'm here to do some deep ancestral work. Here to do some deep work for myself and to really transform a lot of things. And that does not come without struggle, right? I don't want you to think it's sunshine and rainbows. When we're transforming things, this is deep, dark work, but it brings the light. It brings higher levels of consciousness. It brings you to sense more senses of gratitude and authenticity and integrity and your own true self speaking out. So eighth house is about transformation. It's about trauma and healing. It's about death and rebirth. It's about hidden taboo subjects that don't want to be shared. It's very psychotic. It's psychotic miasm, not like psychotic like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. It's psychotic miasm in homeopathy. It's about hidden subjects. It's about that was the psychotic miasm, spiritual mysteries about the unseen world. This placement often creates a life marked a profound transformation. So, Chiron in the eighth house is profound transformation throughout my life. And there's so much more about that. Like, my soul chose that moment in time and space because it needed some real growth. It needed some real transformation to occur. And I think that's beautiful. I could cry thinking about it because like we think about our hard times as like, oh, this happened to me, this happened to me, but I chose it all and it's all happening for me to bring me to where I need to go. And I just think that that's a beautiful way to look at hard times in your life. And I've had a really blessed life, but I've also had some really tough things, like my fourth grade experience, like my chronic illness experience. I've had some really hard griefs in my life, right? And I'm sure there'll be more to come because that's my life. It's a never-ending transformation. So, and I'm here to do the work. I'm here for it. All right. So there can be experiences in the eighth house that are difficult to explain to others, a sense of seeing beneath the surface, an attraction to healing, psychology, spirituality, many topics that other people would avoid. I am very attracted to all these things. Looking back, much of my life has definitely involved learning how to put words and experiences that felt too deep into complicated or unconventional to explain. I definitely can relate to that. And the gift of Chiron and Gemini in the eighth house is about to speak the things that others struggle to speak about. Almost that's so interesting. That is so interesting because having a journey with interstitial cystitis and chronic pelvic pain, I've been called to speak about that a lot too. And I'm like, how do I tastefully speak about that, like pain and pleasure and dealing with chronic illness in that area? I will eventually come to speak about that. It's on my list of things to share about, but it's a tough one to share because there's a tie between pain and pleasure, and there's a tie between um, all of that and what that means in life for someone who deals with chronic pelvic pain. That's a tough thing, and I dealt with that since most of my life. And then it got really that's what really got me was my really, my big pain points. And people don't want to talk about that, the pain, the pleasure in that area at the same time. So that's so interesting. Okay. I'm doing, see, I'm actually healing as I talk to you. Things. Um, to bring the language of transformation and to help others make meaning from suffering. And I feel like that's a big part of my work to help you understand your suffering and make meaning of your suffering because your suffering has a purpose. Your pain serves a purpose all the time. Okay, your Chiron placement holds a story too, of course. And every Chiron placement tells a story. It reveals pains that shaped you. It reveals beliefs that you've inherited. It reveals patterns that you have to continue to revisit because that wound probably will never fully be healed, but you'll keep transcending it. The gifts hidden inside your struggles. So understanding your Chiron placement can bring tremendous compassion and clarity. And sometimes the very thing that you've spent your life trying to overcome becomes the medicine that you are meant to share. Okay. So if you want to explore your own Chiron placement, you can do that with me by booking a natal chart. So I have astrology sessions I do a natal chart reading for you and I explain everything in your natal chart, like your Chiron and the wounds that it will have, and I'll give you tips on how to heal that Chiron. Sometimes it might be a homeopathic remedy. Sometimes that's really more in a homeopathic session, honestly. I might give a flower essence at that time in a natal chart reading. Depends. It depends on what the thing is. But I might just give you like journaling work to do as well. Um, and it we'll explore your natal Chiron placement and the core wound that you hold, how that showed up for you in your life, the emotional patterns that keep repeating, current transits that might be affecting your life besides Chiron, because other transits affect us, like I said, Uranus moving into Gemini, that's affecting me and my personal Chiron planet, right? So interesting. How astrology, healing, and personal life intersects, and practical ways to work with your chart to support healing. So, because your wound is not something to fix, it's the doorway to your deepest wisdom. So, if you like to explore your chart and uncover the story your soul is telling you, I'd love to work with you. You can learn more on my website, brightlightwellnesscoach.com, or you can, of course, just, email me and let me know. Sometimes the place that really hurts becomes that hurts the most, I should say, becomes the place from which we heal others. And that's the story of Chiron, right? It was the place that hurts and how then he turned that into being a healer, right? He was hurt and healed others. And Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and you really enjoyed learning about Chiron, moving into Taurus as a collective energy, and explore your own Chiron chart. Look at what zodiac sign it's in, look at what house it's in. It's also things like what it's conjunct, what it's squaring, how is it talking to other planets in your chart? There's that to look into. If you're in your Chiron return, if you are in Taurus, you are in your Chiron return. It'll be when it actually moves over your planet, your sun, when you know your Chiron, not sorry, not your sun, your Chiron. But mine was in Gemini, so that will come should be happening about 10 years for me, which is around the time Chiron return happens. Okay. Anyway, I've talked enough. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. What do you want to learn more about? Do you love the astrology stuff? If you don't love it, I'm sorry. You'll probably hear more of it because I'm loving it. And whatever I'm loving is what I usually communicate. So I am probably going to share more about astrology because I've always had this affinity for astrology and I love the Greek mythology stories and I love that as a child. One more thing. This is about learning. So, and Gemini and Chiron, right? Because it is a wound for me. Like I loved learning about those things. I loved going to the planetarium and when they would talk about like watch the stars and they would put the sky up and they would tell the stories. I loved the stories. I loved hearing like I always loved fantasy stories. Like that was my favorite. When I was younger, I would read tons of fantasy books and I just loved that. And then I always loved astronomy as well, because astronomy is the actual, the science of the planets, right? And astronomy and astrology are separate, but they come together, obviously, because this is the stories, right? And also the astrology is also, how that energy affects our lives, right? And astronomy is just, the science of the planets. I've always loved that. When I taught in schools, I love teaching the solar system and all the ins and outs about that. It was like my favorite. It was so fun for me. So, yeah, I've always had this connection and now this connection has really deepened within me. When I've learned how much astrology affects us on the physical, mental, and emotional level and how that energy is affecting us day in and day out, I feel very called to share about it more. And yeah, it's just really exciting for me. So anyway, it's been very validating as I really resonate with it all. Anyway, I will let you go. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Let me know in your comments about anything you want to share about Chiron and your chart or anything like that. And feel free to book in a session. I would love to support you in that area. And when you book in a homeopathic session, just so you know, an initial homeopathic session or follow-up homeopathic session, all you have to do is ask me to bring up your chart or ask me. I will usually ask you if I'm allowed to see your chart. And if I'm allowed, I will use your chart to help guide me in my prescribing. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will chat with you soon. Thanks for being here with me.